was still a student, was Felix Ehrenhaft. Now I have to explain Felix Ehrenhaft to you. Felix Ehrenhaft was also a professor of physics in Vienna. He had to leave when Vienna became part of Germany. He said all sorts of things which contradicted everything which other physicists said. For example, when Millikan said that there is a lowest electric charge, the electron, he said, no, he has found lower charges. When people said the inertial motion is on a straight line with constant speed, he said, no, the inertial motion is on a spiral. When people said we have electrolysis but magnets cannot do the same thing, he said he had found that magnets also dissolve water. When people said there are no single magnetic poles, he demonstrated single magnetic poles by experiments. And so many scientists, many physicists regarded him as a charlatan. Now when he came back to Vienna, all of us physics students said, we'll expose this guy, because we were all in favor of theory and enamored by theory. And we had heard about him, about his reputation. And he exposed us instead. He said, he made the experiments in front of us. He said, now you big mouth, what are you going to say now? What can you say? You have to sit there, you can't open your mouth, you don't know anything. And this was very inspiring. He also did the very same thing at the same university in Alpbach. There was a little house where he set up his experiments. There were important physicists there, Rosenfeld, who was, Niels Bohr's PR man, Price, one of the most abrasive physicists in the profession. There was also Turing, and there were other physicists. They came in there, they came out as if they had seen something obscene. Then the next day Ehrenhaft gave his lecture, and he said, in the end of the lecture, he said, what can you do, you theoreticians? You don't know anything. You have to shut up. You have to remain seated. You see, but we all believed in theory. We said, Ehrenhaft can't be right. And so we tried to but it was not possible. So we discovered that there was some difficulty about this so-called truth in physics. And this sank in with me much, much later, not at the time. Because at the time, this was a very interesting lesson for me about how certain ideas can get hold of a person and you can't get rid of it. We believed in empiricism. We believed in theoretical physics. But as far as we were concerned, the experiments of Ehrenhaft didn't show anything. They were just, it was called a Dreck effect, a dirt effect. Something was there we couldn't say. So this was the second guy who had a great influence in this respect, which came up only much, much later. You see, not at the time. At the time I was slightly puzzled. But slowly as time went on, this started percolating, it rose and made a contribution to all sorts of doubts. Then the third guy I met was Philipp Frank. Now Philipp Frank was one of the founders of the Vienna Circle. He was the successor of Einstein in Prague when Einstein went to Berlin. He was a good friend of Einstein. He was a physicist. And he was also a founder of the Vienna Circle, of the first Vienna Circle, which started a few years before the traditionally so-called Vienna Circle, and of the second Vienna Circle, and became professor in Harvard. I came to know him, and I listened to a lecture of his in Alpbach. And there he said, look, my dear friends, everybody talks about the Copernican revolution. And everybody talks about how bad Aristotle was. And everybody at the same time says that scientists are empiricists. But if you look at it, Aristotle was the real empiricist. So the Aristotelian arguments were really good arguments. So if Copernicus won, he did not win because of empiricism, but because of something else. This was another element which lingered and started festering only later on. My first aggressiveness went against philosophers who started talking about the sciences without really knowing very much about them, as at that time many philosophers didn't. They just said we have to reconstruct what the scientists say and so on, but they didn't do it very well. So actually, if you read it, against method is mostly against philosophy of science as a way of making meaningful the complicated things which scientists say. And what I say there, and also of revealing the method underlying the sciences. And what I say there is no such method actually. And that is also nothing new because, many scientists said that. Einstein said, very often he said that, well, compare a scientist with an epistemologist. A scientist faces a complicated situation. So in order to get somewhere in this situation, he cannot use a simple rule. He has to be an opportunist. That is the word that Einstein uses. So, I mean, actually, so when I say against method, there is no method, this is something which many scientists had already said before. It was nothing new, although it was something new, apparently, to the philosophical community. And now, most historians of science nowadays, I mean, take it for granted that you can't simply set up a rule and then say that this is what science follows. Besides, by now people have discovered that the word science covers many things. Look, there is macroeconomics, there is Konrad Lorenz with his geese, there is physics. I mean, there is topology, which is also a science. There is theology. Theology was one of the early sciences, you know. Are they all the same thing? Far from. Far from it. So all this taken together made me first doubtful of philosophy. And secondly, you know, the idea that you find a concentration of truth in science is an idea of philosophers. It is the idea already of Immanuel Kant, and then of philosophers who follow him. And then it got hold of some scientists, not of all of them, but of some of them who took over this dogmatism from the philosophers. Otherwise, you see many scientists say we don't know what we are about, we don't understand the matter. When the quantum theory came out for the first time, people said, well, we know how to work with it. We know how to interpret some experiments, but what it means overall, we have no idea. So taking all these things together then, and Imre Lakatos, write that book, don't make it another shade of gray, I want to be able to attack something, you know, which made it a little more radical, brought out this first book. It was all a series of accidents, also stylistic considerations when, for example, I can argue something or I can tell a story. I take a story. If I can say something softly, and if I can say something, I mean, a little more wickedly, I prefer to say it in the wicked fashion. So all this work together to create this book. Well, you see, I mean, my difficulty is the notion of truth. I do understand, and everybody understands, what it means to say the truth before a judge. You know, you are supposed to say the truth, nothing